All right. Welcome, everybody, back to another episode of Fastlane Founders with me, Greg Keel. I'm here with Dab Riga, and this is going to be a super fun conversation because we are talking a little bit outside the box today, and we're going to dig into some cool stuff on the forefronts of the cannabis industry. So, welcome. How's it going today?
Going well, Greg. Thanks for having me. And I'll just say, we might be talking outside the box, but we might be talking inside the hot box. So that's something to prepare for.
Yeah, well, it's been a very long time since I've been in a hot box, but I'm glad we can do this in a controlled environment.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm Dab Riga, and I'm founding a cannabis manufacturing venture in the legal adult use industry out here in New Jersey. It's a triple bottom line venture, and it's going to be powered by AI native industrial robotics. So I think there's a lot for us to explore in that. Uh, Coming into the industry, I'm a 20-year tech startup veteran and creative and academic. So I'm happy to discuss many facets of entrepreneurship and of this industry in particular.
Definitely. So, what's your story? How'd you get here? You talked about being an academic, a tech founder. What's the road to get to this new venture?
So I'll tell it like this. I studied brand strategy when I was at business school. I studied under Professor Scott Galloway, who is one of the leading experts in this field. And I say he was a student of David Ocker, who's the father of modern brand strategy. So I consider myself a disciple of the Grand Master in that department. That was going back more than a decade. And after graduating business school, I worked in tech startups and enterprises of different sizes, mostly as a software engineer and data engineer. But that took me from ed tech, where I worked at a company called Newzella, and I got to see it explosively grow, quintupling in headcount over 3 years while I worked through that growth. And I've also worked at big enterprises like Take-Two Interactive, the AAA game company that owns Rockstar Games and 2K. So I've seen things from a lot of different angles, a lot of different growing pains, and a lot of different stages of corporate organization. All through that time, I had in the back of my head that one of these days I'd like to become a founder myself. And I'm here in all of these different sized companies taking notes on things way beyond my role. And in 2020, I'm a native New Jerseyan. 2020, New Jersey legalized adult use cannabis. And something clicked in my head where I was like, in business school, they trained us to look for emerging markets, that those are the best opportunities because you get to, benefit from the growth of the entire market as it grows. And I said, here's an emerging market in my own backyard. I was born and raised in New Jersey, lived here more than half of my life. The other half was in New York City. And so it's really my entire life has been here in the New York City metropolitan area. And that's where my venture is based as well.
Okay. So you talked about wanting to become a founder, and you have a long journey of working for companies of various sizes. What first of all attracted you to the cannabis industry and kind of this automated, manufacturing? How did all of that kind of intermix with each other?
Sure. So beyond my background in tech, I mentioned I'm a creative. I was a music producer. And so I worked with all kinds of recording gear, reel-to-reel tape decks, all the way up to all the computer-based stuff over the years. I like fixing cars. I like DIY electronics. So I've always been kind of a gearhead. I like telling people I don't have a green thumb, I have a silicon thumb. And so when I thought about getting into this industry, manufacturing, processing, packaging, and labeling felt like the most technologically friendly area of the supply chain. And I think there's arguments to be made for distribution as well with the the traveling salesman algorithms and things like that. But the idea is here in manufacturing, we're using machines. If we're doing things according to global best practices in CPG, then we're doing a lot of automation. That means using things like programmable logic controllers, PLCs, and systems that link those together and tying that into our typical IT networks in the cloud, and maybe not for certain things that are too mission critical, and understanding all of those things, what we call OT-IT convergence. That's stuff that felt like a natural extension of my expertise and just something that fascinates me day after day. A lot of my competitors in the cannabis industry are not of that mindset. They're doing things manually, all the way through the packaging line, which to me, I think there's a benefit to handcrafted products, but I don't think anyone cares about handcrafted packaging in the cannabis industry. So that to me is like a place where it doesn't really make sense to be following these old 20th century ways. And, getting into AI-powered industrial robotics, that's really just looking at manufacturing in every other industry right now and seeing that that's where the world is today. That's not where things are going. That's where they have been for some time.
Okay. So what does your company do? What are you automating? What's kind of the processes that you're taking over in this space? Because it's clearly not a, we're growing pot and processing it into something. There's something else here beyond the green thumb side of things.
So yeah, we're not, the way that the licensing is set up in New Jersey, it's different in every state, right? So in New Jersey, there's separate cultivation and manufacturing licenses. We didn't get a cultivation license. So we are going to curate from the cultivators of New Jersey as our raw materials. And we're going to focus on two product lines. One is going to be solventless concentrates, like only solventless. And then the other product line is going to be reliably low dose pre-roll joints. So we really see ourselves as bookending the market in terms of potency and sort of consumer sophistication, right? So like someone who's a seasoned cannabis consumer is going to be getting into or reaching for those concentrates. And someone that's a casual user or a beginning user is going to be reaching for those low dose joints that are actually, believe it or not, pretty hard to find on the market right now. And I'll just briefly say about joints. Pre-rolls just overtook loose flower as the dominant product category in the entire cannabis industry in the United States. So that's one reason we're getting in there. And concentrates are really the highest margin item on the shelves. So those are some of the strategic reasons we're getting into those product lines first. So we'll have branded product lines. We're going to be unleashing these brands on the market as soon as we launch for those two lines. And we'll also be doing contract manufacturing. Now, to answer your robotics, to get more specific into that line, so there is a whole cottage industry of automation in the cannabis industry already, right? There's no shortage of pre-roll automation machines to choose from. There's all kinds of packaging and labeling and weighing solutions that are automated, things like that. Where I see an opportunity is to do things with multi-purpose robots. Like one, I think a great example is something we call, sorry, junior high schoolers, out of the room for a minute, but there's a industrial machinery item called a case erector. And what that does is it takes a flat packed cardboard box and makes it three-dimensional and possibly puts the tape on the bottom, seals it, makes it, solidly three-dimensional. And in the 20th century, you would have to have a different case erector for every box size. Now, with 21st century industrial robotics, we have what's called a random robotic case erector. And it can be surrounded by shelves of 6 or 7 or 10, or depending on the model, different sized boxes. And it can just go and grab any one of them and do that. So you're saving not only your capex, but your footprint in your facility like crazy. So you can take that same logic and apply it to lots of other parts of the production process. I think packaging and labeling is really the low-hanging fruit there, but I think even in production, there's steps that can be done this way. I don't want to get too into all the details, if that's okay, because some of the stuff some of it is proprietary. That's why I love the case erector example, because that's common knowledge. You could just go find on the internet if you just look up random robotic case erector. But and it's something I think we should all look into using, those of us with case erecting needs. But what I see us doing is using low-cost open source industrial robotics, as well as using open source private LLMs and other kinds of open source AI for like VLMs, like vision language, or VLAs, vision language action models, and things like that. Our company is going to develop an expertise. So I say we're still pre-launch. We're fully licensed in New Jersey. I have a properly zoned facility. It's partially built out, and we're just getting to that finish line. And I already have 2 robots built, and we're already getting ahead of the curve on this. We're going to develop the expertise to teleoperate and develop training sets with these robots to do these tasks. And we will also develop the expertise to run simulations, randomized simulations for these same tasks, which is basically a best practice right now in automation of this kind. My team, right now I'm a solo founder. I have a board of advisors that I'd love to tell you about in a little while, and some other fractional service providers that I've been working with over the years since I launched the venture. But anyone that we do hire once we launch is going to meet these robots on day one. And it's never going to be a question of this robot's here to take your job. It's this robot is here to preserve your job, not you personally, but the existence of this job that you get to keep. There are going to be competitors in this industry that get squeezed by price compression. And we're going to have lights out manufacturing doing packaging and labeling in the wee hours of the night while we all sleep. And the people that stay working with us and we stay making that money, they're going to say, hey, you know what? We wouldn't be staying here if it wasn't for these robots. And someone that I respect a lot that I was speaking with at MJ Unpacked, a cannabis conference here in New Jersey in Atlantic City recently, said, oh, it's not so easy to go do that if everyone's already there doing it manually and used to that, because they see it as a threat to their jobs. You're going to deal with sabotage and slow work and things like that in response. Not us. So that's what really excites me about that angle in particular.
Yeah, that's all super cool stuff, and really reframing the use of robots and AI from that perspective, right? It's so important, to make it clear to anybody who's working for you that, you didn't have a job a week ago, you do have a job today, and you have a job because these robots are doing the work for us, right?
Yeah.
And
really, if you think about it, I'm going to tell you today, your job is to sit there, do something that you know how to do with your hands. Now you have to do it in virtual reality with game controllers. And you're controlling that real robot. And you're seeing what that real robot's seeing in the real world. And you keep doing it until we succeed 100% of the time with that robot. And then a few weeks later, you walk away from that station and that robot's still doing what you were doing through it. And instead of saying, now, go find a new job, sucker, it's what do we need right now? We're going to upskill you. We're going to cross-train you. We need you to go do an in-store. You're not a people person. We need you to work on the website. We need you to do social media. We need you to do social media management, et cetera, et cetera. And then we let people grow into their best selves at our organization because the robots are doing this kind of work.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense.
One other thing I'd love to say about it quickly is um, yet another junior high school problem. But there's this idea from industrial robotics called the 4Ds. And it's a way to guide yourself on what to automate and what to not. And basically, it's like the 4Ds are like dirty, dangerous, difficult, and delicate, or dear is the last one. So it's like if this thing is like so, it's like playing Operation or origami or something, and like we can get a machine to reliably do that, that's great. If it's, dirty and difficult and dangerous, believe it or not, applies to pre-roll production. So that's somewhere where I'm like, let's figure out how to use more robots than they already are in that, because cannabis dust can and has been a cause of fatalities in the cannabis industry. And so it's a major occupational hazard. Our pre-roll production is going to happen inside of a clean room thing. And I don't really, if I can stand it, I don't want ever there to be humans in there. So that's really the approach, because of that guidance, right? That gives us this easy methodology to apply to say, wait, where do we put the robots? Where do we put the people?
Yeah, I mean, that's, it kind of reminds me, going back 120 years, right, where, the Ford Motor Company, kind of revolutionizes this assembly line concept, right? And this is the first time that I've heard a startup talk about revolutionizing the assembly line concept, right? I hear about giant companies saying, "Oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and we're using robots for this," but I haven't come across anyone in my travels who is literally building a company from scratch with this in mind from the start.
So, Greg, let me tell you another, since you brought up the auto industry, I got to tell you this book that really informs what I'm doing and inspires me on a weekly basis. I'm bringing it up to somebody. It's a book. It was written in the 1980s, but it's called The Machine That Changed the World. And it's about how during that time, these Japanese auto companies were dominating the global market share. And it was sort of these American academics saying, hey, can we figure out why this is happening? What forces are causing this? And in the book, they drew a contrast to, what existed before Henry Ford was what they call craft automotive manufacturing, which is where literally every part was made by hand. And they go on to say, certain companies like Aston Martin, for example, still do things that way to this day. And that's why you can only get they only make 100 a year or something, because they're literally making every part by hand still, right? But that was superseded by this mass production assembly line model, right, of your Henry Fords and your Alfred Sloans here in the United States. And then later in the really post-World War II, is when you had these changes happening overseas more. And what's, to me, one of the most ironic parts of it, what I'm about to talk about, is lean manufacturing, which superseded mass production and was the machine that changed the world. They're not talking about the Toyota Corolla here. They're talking about the system of lean manufacturing. And I don't want to spend the whole time talking about it because it's very niche, right? But just to put it shortly, they say, over in Toyota, on the assembly line, they seem to have no problems. Whereas over here in Ford and General Motors, they're stopping the line all the time. Over here in Ford and General Motors in mass production, the foreman has all the power. The foreman's the only one allowed to stop the line. But that line's stopping a lot. Over at Toyota, it looks like a bus. They have this line strung along. You can pull the line all along. Any worker pulls the line stops. Everyone around them forms like Voltron, figures out what's wrong, stopgap solution, long-term mitigation, root cause analysis, fix, boom. Now the line never stops. They give another example of these little tolerance inconsistencies coming in over the time of the mass production line, and then there being a rework station at the end, and all of this rework having to happen. in the mass production, and that doesn't happen in lean because of this same kind of cultural attitude, right? So that was all 50 years ago, almost now at this point though, right? So recently I said to myself, oh, what about the global manufacturing leaders now? What about the contract manufacturers for Apple and NVIDIA, right? That's Foxconn and Taiwan Semiconductor, respectively. I look into it. Are they using these lean? Yes, they're still using lean manufacturing. They've just layered industrial robotics and industrial automation on top of it. And the beauty of it for startups and light industrial manufacturing and small and medium business is that these robots and these AI models are all built on a core of what we call open source. It means that they're free to anyone that wants to go and just learn how to do it, right? For example, the robots that I've built already, they're called SO101. And this is an arm that is, there was a company called Pollen Robotics that developed this arm, and they have a little humanoid robot as well. But the point is one arm in the most simple incarnation costs $300 to build. This is something, if you don't know about this, you're probably thinking, yeah, maybe 20, 30K to get something that can do this kind of stuff, $300. Now you add a camera on there, you add a couple of, maybe you even add an AI brain, you're still under 2K. And you're ready to do this kind of teleoperation, training set data gathering, and everything else that I already mentioned at that very low cost of entry. The companies that are doing it commercially, your Unitrees and the Figure and Tesla bots and everyone else, they base everything they do on the open source work. Same thing with your open AIs and Claudes and Groks, right? So for those of us that have a technical inclination, really all you need is someone on your team that does, and you can go and get 80, 90% of the way to where the big boys are right now for pennies on the dollar.
Yeah, no, that's a great vision. And, with today's technology, I mean, even the last 2 months in, the AI and automation space, things have changed so much, right? It's really crazy what's happening. So let's talk about, the process of starting your company, right? We bring in a lot of founders on here. They talk about, their journey from, man, I know I can do this, to here I am today, right? What have you gone through, in building this, right? What's kind of that journey been like?
Sure. So there's been a lot of lessons learned, and some of them have been exciting and some have been painful. I've been at this almost 4 years now, since I left my full-time career and started working on this full-time. I think one of the great lessons I learned is that a strong vision and a strong capacity to execute can be enough to rally others into your cause. Above and beyond whatever your contractual expectations are out of them. All right. So a great example is, so the way that the rules are in New Jersey, it's we have something called municipal home rule. It means that every one of New Jersey's 564 municipalities gets to decide whether and how many legal cannabis businesses can open and operate there, and in which categories of the supply chain, right? So some municipalities are like, oh, we only want non-retail. We're happy to have cultivators out, say, in the rural areas of New Jersey, right? But we don't want dispensaries here. We don't want to be attracting this element to our town. And then others are quite the opposite. They're like, oh, we're a more urban environment. We're happy to have retail, but we don't want someone trying to take a big space to do a cannabis grow and using all that electricity here in the infrastructure we have, whatever it is. Most 80% of the municipalities in New Jersey just said, you know what? Too much trouble. None. Zip. Nothing. The other 20% went and, modified their zoning ordinances to shoehorn the cannabis industry in. One thing funny about New Jersey, it's the most densely populated state in the United States and the contiguous United States. And there's very, very little open space. I was telling you, Greg, when we first talked, right? I went out to Denver and I was driving from the airport to downtown Denver, looking out the window of the taxi cab and looking at a crane out in the distance doing some kind of construction in some big open field. And just for me, a New Jersey boy, like, whoa, what? I've never seen that much wide open space in my life, right? Everything here had to be shoehorned in to existing infrastructure. So that made finding a location very challenging because they would kind of have this restrictive zoning, like you can be in this part of this zone on this block between these two streets. That's kind of like the extent of the zoning around here. So I was trying to find a properly zoned place because the order of operations is get that binding LOI, letter of intent, or a lease or a mortgage, whatever, for the site control is what they would call that. Commercially, you have to get commercial site control, and then you can go apply to a municipality, and then they can make up their own rules around that. And then you can get the license from the state. To put it briefly, there's more nuance to it, but that, for our purposes, that's the process. So I was looking around the neighborhoods, towns directly connected to me, because that's another nuance. I'm getting a micro license in New Jersey, or I have it. So I can only be in my own town or bordering town. So I finally found a little spot in Montclair, my town. It was like under 800 square feet. And I was like, it's under 800 square feet, but it's properly zoned. That's the key. Whatever, I'll just do something here. I'll just get it off the ground. And I got a binding LOI. I didn't sign a lease, just a binding LOI. That was the minimum table stakes. So I got that. I'm like, boom, I got the LOI. Now I have to apply to Montclair. Let's find out what that's like. And the local ordinance that they wrote said it shall be on the website how to apply for one of these licenses. So I looked all over the Montclair website, couldn't find the form. I called the clerk's office. I'm like, hello, it says in the ordinance here, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, no, it's there. Go to our news and updates section. Now on the right sidebar, scroll down, the fifth to last story there, click on that. Okay, now scroll all the way down to the bottom of that page. There's the form right there. So I'm like, okay, I get the form. I open up the form. The form says, application deadline, August 30th or September 1st. I look at the calendar. It's August 28th. And I'm like, oh gosh, I have to get this in right now, like right away. So I hadn't even formed my corporation yet. I call up my licensing lawyer. I'm like, we have to form the corporation and get these local application materials done, like literally in 48 hours, right? Like suddenly I'm putting this on my lawyers that I have on a thin retainer. I'm like, please, we have to get this done right now. I call up my real estate agent, my commercial real estate agent, who's going to be getting a very slim commission off of this 770 square foot space. Like, we have to get this binding LOI co-signed. Like, I know we have it verbally, but we have to get this co-signed and set in stone in the next 48 hours. And that meant, okay, that means they have to get their lawyers together and talk to my lawyers and get the redlining process done and all this other stuff. I don't know about your lawyers, but my lawyers typically do not offer that kind of service level agreement for that kind of turnaround time, right? But I'm there beating that drum. I'm like, we got to get this application. We got to get this in. This is it. This is our only chance. We got it. We're going to do it. Everyone pulls together, gets everything together, all the T's crossed, all the I's dotted. We get it in there that last day, the Friday, 4:20 p.m. Literally, I walk into the office and hand in the packet. And I'm like, boom, there it is. The one thing I forgot to mention, non-refundable $15,000 application fee. So all in that 72 hour period, I had to go through the, the loss cycle around that $15,000. I was like, first I was in shock, I was in denial. And then I finally made it to acceptance over that 72 hours. And then also everyone else just came together beautifully to get everything done. And then the next thing, happens is that's now sitting there, and we don't get any response from the town about what's happening internally. They have no obligation to tell anyone anything, and they don't. So we're just sitting there waiting. Now, my landlord over at that spot starts getting cold feet. And she calls, she's like, listen, I read what you sent me. Like, what are you saying? Like, there's going to be these regulators coming into my building, and like, there have to be security cameras everywhere. Like, I don't like the sound of this. And and I was like, let's get a call. Like, okay, let's see what we can do. And I got on a call with her lawyers and my lawyer. We were on a conference call. This lawyer was like the most anti-cannabis person. He's like, listen, disrespectfully, I just have to say so and so and so and so. I've never heard anyone preface their statements with disrespectfully before, but that was the kind of conversation it was. So that fell through. Now I'm like, yo, I just floated 15K on this, my new hometown where I've lived for 5 years, like, and right near where I grew up in North Jersey. There's like almost no other properly zoned real estate for manufacturing in this town. What am I going to do? So I started looking at, like, I literally ended up printing out a spreadsheet of every properly zoned address and hoofed it and went and looked in every window and tried to look for things that were disused. And like, I was at that level of desperation. And finally, what happens was there was one license being given in Montclair, and there were 2 applicants. And the other applicant was actually a multi-state operator, like a Canadian and multi-state US operator. And apparently, because of a technicality, they got disqualified. And then I was just it. I got it. And I was like, first timer. The thing about being a first timer in cannabis, though, is that is part of why I'm coming in with all these ideas from the Toyota production system and lean manufacturing, and that's a good thing. I think sometimes it's good to be a new entrant and bring in better practices, right? So the one thing I just was reminded, there's one dot I forgot to connect earlier. The reason I brought up the machine that changed the world and that era of the 50s and 60s is because the irony is that they were American lean manufacturing gurus that went and sparked that whole revolution in Japan. It was actually part of basically World War II reparations from the US, that they were like, we're going to send our greatest experts. Initially, it was to help rebuild the government of Japan. And then I'm sure there was more than 2 thinkers, but the 2 that I know and I advocate for are Dr. Joseph Juran and W. Edwards Deming. So those are 2 1950s, 1960s lean manufacturing gurus. You could basically do a lot worse than either one of them. And they went and they taught all these principles like we talked about at Toyota. And the government of Japan was like, we want you to teach this to all of our big industry. And that was like part of the genesis stories of like Toyota and Sony and so many, well-established global brands that are out of Asia. So that's something that for anyone that is interested in that stuff, that is, I think, a great place to go and explore and learn more. Dr. Joseph Juran was an advisor to Steve Jobs, for example. I mean, these are pretty high level folks to look into.
Yeah, well, for everyone out there, who's watching this series and trying to understand what a fast lane founder is, right? We just spent 10 minutes straight talking about exactly what we're talking about here, right? We're talking about, I've got 48 hours to solve this problem, right? I don't know how to do it, and I need all these different people to come together, and I have no idea how it's going to happen, but I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to figure it out, right? I'm Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible. He's always got these ideas, right? And Benji's like, hey, like, what the heck are we going to do, And he says, I'll figure it out, right? I'll figure it out. And that's what we have to do, especially as solo entrepreneurs, but as entrepreneurs in general, right?
Yeah.
We have to go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Let me finish, and then I just want to pick up the thread about the real estate.
Yeah. And, we have to learn so much about so many different things, right? From real estate to law to zoning to, not even touching our core product, right? And that's what we try to tell people. So yeah, go ahead, jump in. What do you
Yeah,
got?
something that just popped into my head the other day that I think is a fantastic example is the difference between fail safe and fail secure for access control. Like at the end of the day, if there is some kind of crazy power outage and you have maglock doors in your facility, what do you want to happen? Do you want them to be closed when there's no power, or do you want them to be open when there's no power? One is fail safe, the other is fail secure. If you have it closed when the power is out and there's people inside, they have no way of getting out. So I knew in our architectural plans, we want the other one. We want the one where the doors are just wide open in a power outage, an extended multi-day, catastrophic power outage. We would rather keep our people safe at the end of the day than our property, right? We could have inventory insurance. We can get that replaced. We can get the equipment replaced. We can't replace our people. Right? I don't want to be the next Triangle Factory fire. I just don't. I'm sorry. Right? So that's just one example, one little example of all the things that you end up getting steeped in when you want to come do something like this correctly. Right? So getting back to this real estate story, when that other applicant got out of the race, the other manufacturer, they basically had the only other good real estate in Montclair. So that opened up my commercial real estate agent, the same one from the local application story. She calls me up. She's like, hey, is 2,000 square feet too much for you? And I'm like, oh, let me take a look. I get in there after having the other place. I look around. I'm like, we could do so much with this space, especially now that we're layering on this idea of lights out manufacturing and 24-hour operations and partially unattended, fully autonomous industrial robotic automations, right? So I just took a leap of faith and I signed that lease, and now that's what we're building out now. So we have it partially built out. It really just needs some good bones, some MEP as we call it, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. And then all the finishing touches of low voltage electrical systems and security and things like that. And once that's set, then we're ready to put all this stuff into motion, right? So that's like one whole chapter of really building. Parts of it are building any brick and mortar business, right? Like any brick and mortar business, you have to get properly zoned. There's an idea of a zoning variance, but I've learned that is not even an option for cannabis, at least in New Jersey, because it's not even clear what jurisdiction that would fall under. If that would be the cannabis licensing agency or a local zoning agency or a state, they're like, there's no way you could even try to get a variance for a cannabis business. So that was another part of the challenge, was we have to just, whatever it says in the town's ordinance for zoning, we have to do exactly that. And so the next big chapter after that was, architectural planning, and that got us to the framing that we have now. We have really good architects. They know the building very well. They know our industry. And so we have great plans there. We have a great team of contractors lined up as well. So it's something I'm really excited about. But that brings me to my next chapter of my journey, which is fundraising, right? So, if I had that 770 square foot facility, I think I could have bootstrapped it all the way. Now I've bootstrapped it up to where it is now, and it's time to bring in some partners or some other financing sources. So that is fundraising is a whole other expertise that any founder that wants a scalable business needs to develop, right? If you're just doing a lifestyle business, if you want to have a pizzeria or a hair salon, right? You don't need to go learn what it's like to talk to venture capitalists and investors and do a pitch for your business, most likely, right? If anything, it would be friends and family or a SBA loan or something more straightforward like that, hopefully. For what we're trying to do something that has, something on the order of $1 million startup costs, It's going to turn into a 7 or 8 figure dollar annual business pretty shortly after launch. That's when you start having to have these conversations. And I would say one of the biggest challenges as a solo founder for me, one is that being a solo founder is just a red flag to a lot of investors. So you have to figure out ways to mitigate that. But another is that you're always in the weeds, right? Any day to day. Like right now, I'm excited to talk about the specifics of the robots because I just finished building my second SO1 bot yesterday. Like it's like literally what I'm in the middle of. I could just get really deep into that, right? But that isn't, the specifics of that are not what an investor needs to know to decide whether this is the opportunity for them. And one data point here is that most investors are also founders. They've founded their private equity company or they've founded their venture capitalist firm or whatever. And they have to go out and pitch that company to limited partners or other sources of dry powder, of capital for them to go invest in what they find, right? So these are folks that their job is to either be looking at pitch decks or pitching all the time and doing, due diligence. And that's basically it, right? So if you're approaching them, you really need to have something that's up to par with what they're used to seeing, right? So as far as doing a deck or something like that, I think the best thing is to look at successful companies' decks. I'm fortunate to live right by New York City. I get to go to a lot of pitch presentations of other companies, right? And as a founder, I'm there taking notes. I'm like, oh, you know what? Every one of these successful companies, they have a board of advisors. And frankly, that was one of the first things I was like, oh, maybe once people were telling me I was a red flag for being a solo founder, I was like, I think I talk to people all the time in this industry for advice already. And maybe some of them want to be formally known as my board of advisors. And so I was able to recruit an incredible board of advisors, where one of them is a former associate editor of High Times magazine. Another is a registered dietitian nutritionist who makes nutritious edibles. Another is a guy who deploys ATMs into dispensaries in New Jersey and knows like a quarter of them personally, like to help us go to market. Another guy is a PR executive who smoked weed with Cheech and Chong. Another guy's a cannabis lawyer. So we are just now stacked as a team, right? Anything I need in any of those departments, we are ready. And that is the kind of thing that I only decided to do because of this idea that the answer to what is investable is right before our eyes if we just look in the right places.
Yeah, definitely. And having that team, right? We don't necessarily need someone to sweep the floors, right? Because we can do that ourselves. But all of those other advisory type things, I mean, they add value. They bring breadth to what we do. So we'll kind of close this up with a good question. What kind of advice do you have for founders out there getting their stuff going and running through the mud and trying to get above water and survive?
Yeah, I just had lunch with another founder from my industry, and we were talking about what I would call mental shackles. The constraints that we put on ourselves, or the way that we think about ourselves, our self-image, and ways that can limit us. Many years ago, I went on a retreat when I was in business school with some professors and students, and up, to some mountain house for the weekend or something. And I remember I was a home brewer at the time, and I brought up a pony keg of homebrewed ale, and that was like part of the festivities, right? And one of the professors said to me, he's like, if your philosophy is holding you back from what you want to achieve, then it's just your philosophy. It's like you have the power to determine your own philosophy. And if you want to achieve certain goals, then you need to shape a philosophy that allows you to achieve that. Most of us think about ourselves like in some bucket, right? Like, oh, I'm a technologist, I'm a founder, I'm a this, I'm a that. We just acknowledged here, we were only able to talk about a few topics. There's probably 50 topics, and we talked about 3 of them when it comes to being a founder, just in this conversation, right? I found that most things that I didn't think about myself naturally being, I've been able to push myself to do and learn, like being a networker naturally, getting into a sales mindset as someone that is a technologist, individual contributor type, sitting in a room that I'm very uncomfortable in and keeping a smile on my face and being polite to others and mindful. Like, these are things that we can't, if those are things you don't think of yourself as, don't limit yourself. Try to do it. I said to my lunch companion today, I was like, I'm more of the mind system guy. I'm not really like the direct competing sales guy, competing sales guy so much. But knowing that I'm not, I've started playing Texas Hold'em poker. And now I got into it and I found that it is bringing that, it's allowing me to develop that side of my personality in a way that's fun. So I'm not telling you to go out and do this exposure therapy and like put yourself in the worst situation that you're the worst at necessarily. I'm talking about finding creative strategies to develop the skill sets and qualities as a person that you need to develop to achieve your goals.
Yeah, perfectly said. Perfectly said. Well, it's been a great chat today, and I'm super stoked I was able to get you on. I mean, I think your models, are going to work awesome in the cannabis industry. I think on a bigger and longer picture, right? There's definitely room to expand the processes that you're developing long after cannabis, gets created and delivered to the dispensary, and on a much broader spectrum than what you're talking about. So I'm super stoked to see where this goes.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Greg. It's been a pleasure to speak with you. And yeah, just lastly, I'll just say, I think what we've discussed today is part of the answer of how to bring manufacturing back to our shores.
Excellent. Well, I'm all about community and helping out our country, and I think this is a great start. So this wraps up another episode of Fastlane Founders podcast. Thank you all for joining us, and we are here multiple times a week talking to super awesome people like Deb, and we're going to continue doing it until they don't let us do it anymore. So we'll see you guys next time.
See ya.